Hello and welcome to another edition of This. I've written a summary of a particular world view, identifying problems with the world today and putting forward ideas to fix it. It's a rough sketch, just to give a gist of the argument at this stage. So bearing that in mind, we've looked at this, now we're going to look at this. I'm going to argue here that US foreign policy is deeply unethical. Main points. The USA routinely bombs, invades, or in other ways destabilises other countries for its own material gain, or rather mostly for the gain of the elites within the USA. The USA, by which I mean its government and governmental organisations and military, the state, uses coercive diplomacy and its grip over international agreements to keep third world economies subservient to its own. The USA has sponsored death squads and military coups all over Latin America to prevent democratic regimes from threatening corporate profits. Not only Latin America, but also much of the rest of the world. Examples. The following notes are based on a documentary called The Power Principle, available to watch on YouTube. Iran, 1951, overthrew democratic government, which was going to nationalise Iran's oil, so that the oil wealth could be used for the benefit of Iran. Reinstalled the Shah, who was the monarch. The CIA trained the Shah's security forces, considered the worst torturers in the world, according to Amnesty International. Guatemala, 1954. Another democratically elected government of Jacobo Arbenz similarly overthrown. This was a land of extreme inequality. Arbenz wanted to institute land reform in order to address this problem of inequality. Best described as a moderate progressive, not a Marxist. Yet his programs were met with outrage in Washington. Especially concerned were David Rockefeller's United Fruit Company, which owned 42% of the land and had all kinds of preferential treatment. Links to CIA Director Alan Dulles and other prominent decision makers had links to the company. Arbenz was overthrown in order to restore power to a right-wing government from 54 to 90. 225,000 native people were murdered by the CIA's installed military regime. The Congo, 1961. You can skim through some of these notes. The murder of Patrice Lumumba. Chile, 73. General Pinochet, US-backed military coup. Turned stadium into a concentration camp. Disappearances, grabbing people from their beds in the middle of the night. Horrific torture, dropping people out of helicopters. Allende was the democratically elected socialist president, guaranteed every schoolchild a glass of milk at lunchtime, for example. He had a lot of policies that were putting the people first of the company and promoting development rather than sucking the wealth out to American shareholders. Pinochet embraced extreme free market ideas of Milton Friedman and the Chicago Boys. Virtually everything to be privately owned. Deregulation, wage reduction, attacks against unions, elimination of social spending. Threw the majority of the population into poverty, but great for American business and corporations. The Western press described the events in Chile as an economic miracle. Today, Chile is an extremely unequal region. Summary of some of US interventions. Dominican Republic. Brazil, Bolivia, Argentina, all these CIA-backed coups where they put these extreme free market governments in which torture people, crushing any dissent, putting American business first. Nicaragua, CIA creation of the Contra Army, brutal intervention. The ruling family had ruled Nicaragua for 40 years, monopolised all the industries in the country. Particularly sadistic ruler favoured method of execution was throwing dissidents from helicopters into volcano. 1979, the people revolted. Sandinistas, radical reforms. First, public education for children. Thousands of schools and playgrounds. Cut illiteracy to less than 10%. Cut infant mortality by a third. Established a national health service, and so on. Oxfam on the Sandinista government. Nicaragua is exceptional in the strength of that government's commitment to improving the condition of the people and encouraging their active participation in the development process. Contras, who were sent by the CIA, trained by the CIA to crush this progressive government, trained in Honduras and Florida, unleashed a reign of terror on the people of Nicaragua. They focused heavily on economic targets. Missions included the blowing up of oil pipelines, burning and bombing of grain silos, farmhouses and machinery. Reagan, you can look at Reagan's quotes, how he calls these terrorists, he calls them freedom fighters, Orwellian lies. This is what Reagan's like. Later, Congressional Intelligence Committee revealed the Contras had raped, tortured and killed unarmed civilians, including children. These are the guys that Reagan is calling freedom fighters, which is the opposite of what they're doing. Groups of civilians, including women and children, were burnt, dismembered, blinded and beheaded. Haiti. The story of Haiti is the story of capitalist imperialism. First country Columbus discovered and conquered. The indigenous in Haiti were completely eliminated. Spanish began to import African slaves to run sugar plantations. The French kicked out the Spanish. The vast majority of the wealth of France was now generated by 400,000 slaves in Haiti, run by a few thousand slave masters. The slaves revolted, uprising 1793, kicked out the French colonialists, set up the first free and independent republic in the Americas. The powers that... What? Sorry. Let's come back to this. Where are we? The powers that be in the world capitalist system unleash on Haiti terror and misery and punishment, the likes of which the world has never seen. Another uprising, free elections in 90, Aristide wins. The army stages a coup with the help of the United States and France and other great powers in the world. Aristide, forced to flee, comes back in 94 but not allowed to make any of the changes that he's trying to make. Re-elected in 2000, not allowed to finish his term. Again, tries to make the mildest changes in the structures that have been put in place over several centuries, removed from power in another US invasion. Marines arrive and send him into exile in Africa. General Smedley Butler described with remarkable candour his actual role in the US Army. I helped to make Mexico safe for American oil interests in 1914. I helped to make Haiti and Cuba a decent place for the National City Bank boys to collect revenues in. I helped in the raping of half a dozen Central American republics for the benefit of Wall Street. I helped purify Nicaragua for the international banking house of Brown Brothers in 1909 to 12. I brought light to the Dominican Republic for American sugar interests in 1916. In China, I helped to see that Standard Oil went its way unmolested. Butler summed up his message with 4 single words: war is a racket. The American people are largely unaware of all this because the media doesn't tell them or distorts it. Perhaps the greatest propaganda feat has been the profound ignorance of the American public of the atrocities committed in their name. There's further examples here. And then, of course, we've got Iraq and Afghanistan and all of these things. And if you look at the history of the way Iraq has been treated, with the sanctions in the 90s, which absolutely destroyed that country. So, American foreign policy is brutal and murderous and exploitative and imperialist. And that's the point that I want to get across here. In order to change things, we need to recognise that this is the reality at the moment.